The story begins with Bon Ritada, the protagonist who arrives late at the opening ceremony of his university's law faculty. As a result, he doesn't get a chance to talk to anyone, and in addition, he doesn't know how to get to his university. In that, he overhears some girls heading towards the same faculty, so he decides to follow them. However, he loses sight of them in a store, where he spends some time buying things, while the girls are leaving the store. He remains lost outside the place, until he encounters Mitsuo Yanagisawa, a young man who, like him, was also following the same girls but lost their trail in the same store as him. Quickly, they become friends, and head together to the university. There, we learn that Janice, as Yanagisawa prefers to be called, attended the same school his whole life, but transferred due to problems with a friend. Suddenly, a taxi arrives at high speed, and a beautiful girl carrying a bouquet of roses steps out. The protagonist is surprised when the girl starts hitting him with the bouquet, while congratulating him on entering the university. Before leaving, she tells him that she will always be his. The boy picks up the bouquet and starts giving roses to the passing girls to ease the situation, while Janice, still in shock on the ground, realizes this, and starts helping him. Once they are in class, Janice explains to the protagonist about this girl, whose name is Kuko Kaga, who already has her life planned out, and is quite obsessive. We can see that Janice seems deeply traumatized by her. As they discuss this, a girl speaks to them from behind, who turns out to be Kuko Kaga herself. Even though Janice doesn't believe her, she explains that she changed her plans to study with him for the next 4 years. Janice is frightened, runs away, and ends up throwing all his notes, and the girl starts chasing him. Left alone, the protagonist starts picking up all his friends' notes, and that's when Shinami Oka, another classmate, appears and helps him, becoming his friend. After leaving the faculty, the boy encounters a festival of clubs, where each group tries to force them to join. Just as the protagonist is about to be cornered by the Latin dance club, he is rescued by Nana Hayashida, a girl in her senior year of the law faculty, who says that her club doesn't force anyone to join, and that it's their duty to help newcomers. Before leaving, she asked him to call her Rinda, and our protagonist flirts with her, complimenting her lipstick, to which she blows him a kiss. As the evening falls, and on his way home, the protagonist meets Kuko, who explains that she's waiting for Janice. At that moment, Janice calls him on his cell phone, and informs him that he's still at school. Kuko overhears the conversation, so she takes the protagonist's phone, and tells Janice that she'll come to find him. Before leaving with the boy's phone, she returns it, and acts sweet and polite towards him. After this, our protagonist watches her leave, and remembers the time he was hit by a motorcycle years ago, while he was waiting for someone. The next day, we see a dream of our protagonist, where he falls off cliff, with his eyes blindfolded. In that, he is found by someone, but then the image of Kuko comes to his mind, and he wakes up thinking about her. The week passes, and one day at the university, he sees Kuko laughing alone at her phone, so he approaches and asks what she's doing. Then she shows her photos of her and Janice when they were children, and asks if she has seen him because he's been avoiding her. At that moment, we see Janice's passing behind her, making signals to our protagonist not to say anything. The boy tries to distract her, but she still notices, and starts chasing Janice. Inside the university, she can't catch the guy, so she asked our protagonist to find out his schedule, offering to pay him. However, since he doesn't want to, she tells him it was just a joke, and she goes to her class. However, when Kuko leaves, the boy overhears everyone talking about her, and how her parents have a lot of money. Then we see that Rinda is standing behind him, observing everything that's happening. Days pass, and we see our boy at his home giving food to his friend Janice, since his parents don't give him any money because he was transferred to another university, to get away from Kuko. The protagonist says to him that he feels bad for the girl, because she hasn't made any friends, and nobody talks to her. This leads to a small argument between them, but eventually, Janice understands the protagonist POV, so he invites him to a welcome ceremony at the film club. Once they are at the meeting, Janice decides to join the film club, and they find out that Oka belongs to the same club. While they are there, the protagonist hears a lot of noise coming from the next room. Despite being warned by the film club members that it's a club of demons, he approaches, and the door opens to reveal the girls from the tea club, who are completely out of control. They end up taking the protagonist to their party. At the party, they have several men serving as butler, but the boy refuses to drink with them. Instead, they make him fight another guy, who ends up saying that he hates real girls, and he will only be interested in 2D girls, for which they end up calling him 2D boy. The next day, Janice meets the protagonist on the way to the university, and tells him that he ended up going to 5 parties that night, with the girls from the tea club. In that, Janice notices that Kuko is looking for him. That's why he says to the protagonist that he will hide, and ask him not to tell her where he is. After classes, the protagonist wants to go home, when suddenly, he is cornered again by all the university clubs, but Rinda saves him again, loudly declaring that he belongs to her club, the Cultural Research Club. When she realizes he doesn't remember her name, she becomes a bit sad, but then changes her mind, and invites him to go out. However, he notices that Kuko is alone waiting for Janice, so Rinda sends him to go to talk to her. The protagonist sits next to Kuko, and she proceeds to tell him that she feels invisible in the university, because she only knows Janice, but he doesn't even talk to her, and no one else dares to talk to her. The boy suggests to her to go together to a club welcome event, so she can meet people, and just then, another girl appears, and invites them for coffee. At the cafe, this girl talks to them for hours about her club, and eventually invites them to their 3-day, 2-night, welcome party. She admits that she's not from their university, but she enjoys talking to people from other universities. After leaving the cafe, they both agree to go together and meet people there in the cafe. The day of the trip to the mentioned party arrives, and the protagonist arrives first, then Kuko appears and asks him if Janice knows about the trip. The boy shows her a message from Janice, and she gets excited, thinking that he's thinking about her. Just then, they see the 2D boy, who is with a group of people going on the same trip, and the protagonist proceeds to introduce Kuko to him. They find out that the 2D boy's real name is Takaya Satu, but from now on, we will just name him Takaya. After that, some white cars arrive, and the club members get out, instructing everyone to fill out forms with their information, and get into the cars. When they are traveling, our protagonist starts to suspect something, because they deviate from the real route, and end up in a place that looks like a mansion. Eventually, everyone realizes that they are in the clutches of a religious sect, and they are being held hostage against their will. The group locks their luggage, and subjects them to lectures, before taking them to dinner. During dinner, some of the guys who went on the trip started to complain, while the protagonist is worried about Kuko, so he comes up with a plan. He pretends to be a believer of their religious sect, and shares his story about the accident he had, and how he lost most of his memory on it. He demands that anyone who doesn't want to be there should be allowed to leave. The sect members believe him and release all the people, including Kuko. However, just when the boy thought he had saved the girl, she returns, saying to him that she wants to stay, just because she knew that he was only pretending and didn't want to leave him alone. They return to the dining hall, and the protagonist takes advantage of the fact that the sect members are drunk, to ask for the key to their luggage. They give it to him, but the girl who invited them to the party in the first place decides to accompany them. Because of this, they start running until they reach the room where their luggage is kept, and finally escape through a window. Once outside, they run far away until they lose sight of the sect, but they still have no signal on their phones to contact someone. While walking, they start talking about Janice, and what Kuko really feels for him, showing that she cares deeply for him. She also shows a playful and cheerful side of her that she doesn't show when she's with Janice. Later, the girl asks him about his life, to which the protagonist tells her that the accident part of the story was real, and he has no memories of anything, but he says to her that he's fine like that, because he likes to not worry about tragic things. After talking for a while, they see some lights in the distance. They hesitate to approach, thinking they might be some member from the sect, but they end up finding Rinda. The day of the trip, the protagonist tells us that they were rescued by Rinda, who was at the university's summer house where her club was having a welcome celebration, very close to where they were. The next day, the protagonist arrives at the university, and is warmly welcomed by his friends. While they are in the faculty cafeteria, Janice tells the boy that he was so worried that he even wrote to Kuko. The protagonist tells him that she must be very happy, and he reflects on the previous day, even thinking that Janice hates him. Later, Takaya goes to class, and Janice tells Oka that since they both don't have classes until the afternoon, they can accompany each other. Kuko appears, and a jealous scene unfolds, as mistreats and threatens Oka, until Janice intervenes and defends Oka, leaving with her. He stays behind because he needs to talk to Kuko, to thank Rinda's club members for rescuing them. After his friends leave, Kuko is visibly nervous and sweaty. After washing up in the bathroom, she talks to our protagonist, confessing that she always does things to make Janice hate her more, and that she can't stop herself. They decide to thank Rinda, and once they are with her, she invites them to join her club, but they decide to visit it first. They arrive at the club room, and express their gratitude, and are invited to participate in the Oha dance. After leaving the club, the protagonist tells Kuko that she doesn't know how to dance, and he intends to join that club. However, she doesn't want to join it because she wants to enter Janice's club and change his mind. Days later in class, we see that Janice is interested in dating Oka, and tells our protagonist that he will finally end things with Kuko, to have a formal and stable relationship with her, which worries our protagonist. Days pass, and Kuko doesn't attend classes, until one day, she invites our boy to a cafe. At the cafe, they find her with the protagonist and Janice. Kuko wants to explain to Janice why they should be together, and shows him childhood photos and memories of her time together. However, he interrupts her, saying he likes Oka, and wants a relationship with her. This news shocks Kuko, who tries to remind him of everything they shared, but Janice explains that precisely because of that, they can't be in a relationship. He tells her that she's special to him, and he can't fall in love with her. This makes Kuko think that he hates her, and she ends up yelling at him, grabbing him, and crying. Janice leaves, and she stays behind, apologizing to our protagonist, who waits patiently for her to calm down. Hours pass, and they have to leave, but she says she wants to die. Then, a gothic-looking girl named Nana appears, and tells her that she wants to die, she should go to her rock concert. At the concert, Kuko goes wilding, painting herself black, tearing her pants, and even going on stage to insult Janice, until Nana throws her off stage, and she's removed from the venue. The protagonist takes her to her house and sleeps on the floor, while she rests on the bed. While they are there, she starts crying, realizing that she was wrong to impose her desires on Janice, who also has feelings. He tells her he understands because he too is afraid of rejection, which is why he distanced himself from everyone when he lost his memory. He also tells her that when his memories return, the current version of him will disappear. She asks him not to forget her, and he assures her he never will because he likes her and cares about her deeply. She's surprised by his words, but they continue talking normally. Later, Kuko goes back to her house, and sends a message to our protagonist, saying, "You're afraid of being rejected because you also reject them." The next day, our boy takes a train and goes to his parents' house. When he arrives, he goes to his room, where he sees his yearbook, and some photos fall out. As he picks them up, he realizes they are photos of him with Rinda from years ago. Upon seeing those photos, the protagonist runs off to the bridge, where he had his accident. There, he begins to wonder why he doesn't remember anything, and what relationship he had with Rinda. At that moment, he calls Janice and starts crying. Meanwhile, we can see the ghostly version of his old self observing him. The ghostly protagonist tells us that when he had the accident, he was separated from his body like a soul, and can only watch the empty shell of the new protagonist living his life, but he cannot communicate with him. Meanwhile, on a train returning home, our protagonist receives a message from Kuko, asking to talk. Later, he arrives at the cafe where Kuko is waiting for him. She tells him that they just met, and she wants them to be good friends. She gives him one of the 2 makeup mirrors they were able to bring when they escaped from the sect. The protagonist accepts the offer of friendship and the gift as well. The next day, while Janice and her boy are heading to the university, Janice expresses concern about Kuko, feeling that she might have gone overboard with her actions. They run into her at the university's cafeteria, and she overly exaggerates their friendship, until Rinda calls her and explains that she's helping Coco plan her class schedule. The protagonist stays, observing her, and instead of bringing up the photo, he introduces her to Janice. Kuko asks Janice about his class schedule, and upon finding out that he's in a class with a very difficult professor, he gets scared and runs off to try to change to a different class. Rinda offers them again to join her club, and this time, Kuko accepts on behalf of both of them. The scene shifts to the club room, where they introduce themselves and start dancing. Kuko thinks the dance is simple, but when they begin, she moves like a robot, showing that she's terrible at dancing. After leaving the club, Kuko confronts our protagonist, upset because he's her best friend, and knows how to dance while she doesn't. She bursts into tears, and he realizes that she's carrying a lot on her shoulders, as not much time has passed since her rejection. Later, they go to a cafe, and she apologizes for her earlier behavior. The protagonist lends her his makeup mirror, and she's happy to see that she uses it. Kuko explains that she's trying to sort out her feelings, which is causing a complete mess. He understands, and she keeps talking, saying she hopes to become more like Rinda, as she can see that Rinda is popular, and probably has a boyfriend. Once our boy is back at his home, he thinks about Rinda, and wonders why she pretends not to know him. He also recalls how he used to escape from the hospital every night, following a light outside the window. He would find a girl there who told him that she studies at the University of Tokyo, and advised him to study there too. He realizes that the girl was Rinda, making him question the nature of their relationship. We go back to the antagonist past, where we see that he is a sensitive and fearful person, and Rinda takes care of him always. On the last day of classes, they have a farewell with their friends, and at the end, the boy confesses his feeling to Rinda, and tells her he accepts going to Tokyo, so they can study together. Rinda asks him to let her think about it, and he replies that he'll wait for her the next day at the bridge as always. Meanwhile, the ghostly protagonist watches his current self sleeping, and tells us that he was in love with Rinda, even though she only saw him as a friend, just like what's happening with Kuko. The next day, Kuko and her boy meet at the university cafeteria, and Oka arrives to invite them to a party. Kuko declines the invitation, that the protagonist accepts. In private, the boy asks Oka why she's inviting Kuko when she treats her poorly, suspecting that Oka might have bad intentions. However, Oka says she wants to be Kuko's friend and mend things, so he agrees to help her get Kuko to come to the party. On the day of the party, Oka knows a lot of people, and Kuko is also there because the protagonist invited her. However, she immediately starts arguing with Janice, who is also present. Kuko challenges Janice to confess his feelings to Oka, as she thinks he's only pretending to like Oka to distance himself from her. Out of frustration, Janice calls Oka over, and asks her to be his girlfriend in front of everyone at the party. Oka takes it as a joke, and both Janice and Kuko become upset. Our boy and Takaya intervene and take them to the next room, where the tea club was once again. Afterward, Oka starts recording everything for her club, and at the end of the party, we see that Janice and Kuko ended up drunk just as the protagonist and Takaya were for the first time. On their way home, Kuko is drunk, and despite the boy wanting her to go home, she insists on going to his place to badmouth Janice's all night. He becomes tired of her behavior, and asks to no longer be friends, while returning her makeup mirror. There she refuses to accept it. He tells her it was a mistake to become friends again after she rejected him, and calls a taxi for her, and says he won't wait for anyone before walking away. The next day, Rinda notices they are distant, but when she tries to talk to the protagonist, he explodes and reproaches her for treating him as if she didn't know him from before. After this, he runs off, and she follows him, until he locks himself in the bathroom. Inside the bathroom, she blames herself for the accident he had, and tells him that she went to the bridge the next day to give him an answer, but arrived too late. Later, as it gets dark, Rinda leaves the university, and Kuko is waiting for her at the door. However, Kuko is ignored by Rinda when she exits. Similarly, our protagonist ignores her too when he leaves, but she starts following him, and he runs away. Unable to catch up with him, Kuko takes someone else's bike, and continues to pursue him. Meanwhile, our boy runs without knowing where to go, until he reaches a bridge. Contemplating that if he falls again, he could fix everything and be himself again. At that moment, when he's on the edge of the bridge, Kuko appears, and hits him with a bike, preventing him from jumping. She tells him not to leave her, and that she wants to be with him forever, and that she loves him. After this, the guy with the bicycle arrives with a police officer, and accuses Kuko of stealing the bike, leading her to the police station. At the police station, while waiting for Kuko's father to arrive, she apologizes to our protagonist for all the trouble, and explains that at the party, she wasn't thinking about Janice. She was just angry that Oka easily got what she had been struggling to achieve, and thought she might lose him too. She confesses that she didn't want to acknowledge her feelings for him, and that it would be fair if he rejected her, but he refuses to do so. Kuko's father arrives, and after taking her out of the station, he apologizes to the protagonist, and hopes they can still be friends. However, Kuko corrects him, stating that they are actually dating. The next day, Kuko was waiting for our boy at the bus stop, and they go together to the university. At the university, Takaya notices they are holding hands, and Kuko tells him they are now dating, and she loves him, which prompts Takaya to tease our protagonist, until Janice arrives with his dyed hair. In the university cafeteria, Janice explains that after the rejection, he was going to shave his head, but the hairdresser wanted to practice, and ended up with that hair color. He's happy that the boy is now with Coco, as he feels liberated. However, Coco starts teasing him about Oka's rejection. The protagonist interrupts her, saying it's time to go to class, and they agree to meet during a free time. Later, Oka appears, but Janice, embarrassed, runs away, leaving everyone behind. Oka explains that she didn't take his confession seriously because they were at a party. Then Rinda appears, because she wants to talk to the protagonist, but he gets up and runs out of the cafeteria. As the days pass, our boy and Coco's relationship becomes closer, while the boy avoids Rinda's calls and messages. One day, when the protagonist cleans his room, we see that he keeps many corn magazines and a condom in a box. Just then, Coco visits, and after they talk, she asks him what happened with Rinda, but he only says that they had fight, and Rinda tries to help him, but he unloads his emotions on her, and now they're not talking. Coco accepts that explanation, and opens the box, thinking there are chips inside, but she realizes its content, and they both get scared, and end up on the bed. He apologizes, and she tells him their relationship is just starting, but she wants their first time to be in Paris. Afterward, she suggests they go buy cake, and as they leave, they bump into Nana in the elevator, but they don't recognize her without makeup. Days pass, and one day, the protagonist receives an unknown call, informing him about a water leak in his neighbor's room, and that he should check if his room is flooded. He leaves Coco at the university, and goes to check, finding Nana, the girl who saw them in the elevator. She tells him she's Rinda's neighbor and friend, and as he opens his door, she pulls Rinda out of his room, and leaves them alone. Our boy asks to talk in his room, and while they discuss, he starts crying, and Rinda tells him about the love confession he made after they finished school. At that moment, Coco calls him, and says that Janice has a problem. We go back to the past, and we see that while waiting for Rinda, the protagonist overhears her telling her friend that she doesn't consider him a man, and that she doesn't like him at all. This angers the boy, and when Rinda realizes that he heard, she gets scared, and tries to apologize to him over the following days, but he avoids her. However, on a rainy day, she waits for him, and apologizes for being stupid. The protagonist forgives her, saying that he also doesn't like her, but at that moment, the ghost of our boy tells us that his feelings for her triggered, and he hopes she felt the same. In the present, the protagonist is on a call with his girlfriend, while Rinda is in her room. Coco tells him that Janice has had a problem with Oka again, and she hasn't seen him since. She asks the boy to go find him since she can't do it herself, as being locked up with someone of the opposite sex would be considered cheating, just like what our protagonist is doing. At that moment, Rinda leaves, and the boy goes to see his friend. When he arrives, he sees Janice being harassed by a girl from the theater club. To drive her away, the protagonist pretends to be his boyfriend, scaring girl off. Then they enter Jana's room, and he tells him that he asked Oka not to talk to him anymore, and how he lost his trust after seeing everyone talking about him. The protagonist calls Takaya, and suggests having a party to cheer up his friend. Later, the two guys arrive at the amusement park, and find Takaya with Coco, who overheard the call and decided to join the party. Takaya receives a call from Oka, and Coco invites her to the party, leaving Janice surprised. When Oka arrives, Coco treats her poorly, trying to defend Janice, but Oka tells her not to interfere, and that he already asked her not to talk to him anymore. When Oka was about to cry, Coco put some noodles on her face, saying that only she can look cute crying in front of the protagonist. This calms Oka down, and she asks him to record her as she was being funny, which makes Coco and Oka laugh. They spend the day at the amusement park, and little by little, Janice and Oka reconcile. At night, they go to the protagonist's house, where they all have dinner and a sleepover. In the middle of the night, our boy wakes up and talks to Rinda. To his surprise, Rinda was staying in Nana's room, so they went to the balcony to talk. During the conversation, the protagonist asks her what her response was when he confessed to her before the accident. She replies that her answer was no, and that she didn't consider him as her partner. He feels relieved, and asks if she wants to go back to that time, but he doesn't let her answer and shouts that he does want to go back, but immediately takes it back, and realizes what he said. Rinda takes the opportunity to tell him that it's just a dream, and they both go back to their rooms to sleep. Then we see the ghost of the protagonist watching him and saying that he still loves Rinda, but can't separate from his body, as doing so would make him disappear. The next day, Oka and Coco leave early from the protagonist's room. At the university, Oka tells the boy that Coco is feeling sick with the flu, and won't be attending classes. With that excuse, several days passed without them seeing each other, and they only communicate through text messages, until one day, Coco comes to the university for club practice for the festival, and tells him that she's feeling better. During the practice, she distances herself from everyone, and even becomes sad when she sees Rinda helping the protagonist and being friends again. After classes, the boy compliments Coco on her beauty and traditional Japanese clothing, but he notices that she looks sad. Suddenly, it starts to rain, and they run for cover. At that moment, she begins to express her insecurities, saying that she tries to look pretty for him, but she always has negative thoughts that bring her down. She asks if he still loves her, and our protagonist consoles her, ending up kissing her. Meanwhile, the ghost of the protagonist mentions that something similar happened with Rinda, but that will remain between Rinda and him. We go back in time, when the ghosts of the protagonist tells us that Rinda has an older brother they both call brother. One day, his brother tells them that you will introduce them to his bride, showing how deeply in love he is. However, in private, Rinda confesses to our boy that she found out the bride is cheating on her brother. They decide to take pictures as evidence to expose the girl. They take photos of the bride and her boyfriend as they were hugging and entering a room together, but when they were about to take more compromising pictures, Rinda changes her mind, and asks to delete everything, and decides to act like an adult. After some time, the bride comes out of the room, and the two corner her. Rinda asks to talk, and she tries to escape. They end up inside the bride's car, and have a conversation. Meanwhile, the protagonist notices that the brother was watching everything from a window in the room, and he sits on the car hood staring at him. In the end, Rinda forgives the bride, and tells her not to do it again, and promises to forget this incident. After that, they leave, and once they arrive at a store, Rinda starts crying because the boy reproaches her for not doing anything. However, he calms her down, saying that she can always count on him, and wherever she is, he will find her and hear her voice. Rinda holds his hand, and asks if she can trust him, but the protagonist doesn't answer. Back in the present, it's a new day, and the protagonist is at the cafe feeling sad, because Coco got sick again with the flu. Rinda arrives, and our boy explains Coco's condition to her. Before leaving, Rinda tells him that he should listen to Coco's voice wherever she is, regardless of the place because she is his girlfriend. The ghost of the protagonist realizes that, and later at night, while his body sleeps, he wonders if he had responded to Rinda back then, he might not have become a ghost. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, the protagonist wakes up, and he can't control his body properly, and ends up falling off the bed. At that moment, he realizes that he has a body again, and he's no longer a ghost. He immediately calls Rinda's name. After that, he gets up to go see Rinda, but he ends up falling. When he gets up, he's back to his usual self, and doesn't remember why he wanted to see Rinda, or even why he's out of bed. When he realizes that he has a cut on his chin from the fall, so he goes back to bed, wondering what happened. The next morning, the protagonist wakes up with a high fever, and tries to go to the hospital, but he can't walk, and ends up tripping at Nana's door. She comes out to see, and reluctantly takes him to the hospital, and brings him back home, where she hands him over to Rinda, who arrived because Nana informed her. In his room, Rinda starts to taking care of him, and tells him that she already called Coco. The protagonist tells her that he wants to see his girlfriend, but deep down, he feels like he wants to stay with Rinda, because he feels that she is real, and Coco was just a dream, and if he doesn't see her, she will disappear alone with his fever. Just then, when Rinda is helping him sit up, Coco arrives with a bouquet of flowers, and slams the door open, angrily asking if our boy is cheating on her. After that, she says that a guy with a girlfriend cannot be locked up with another girl, because it's infidelity. However, seeing Rinda getting scared, she changes completely, saying it was a joke, and throws away the bouquet. Janice catches the bouquet, and enters the room, playing with Takaya about who he will marry. Janice asked Coco if she's jealous and angry, thinking he was being unfaithful, while Takaya introduces himself to Rinda. Coco apologizes to the protagonist, saying that she didn't really think he was being unfaithful, but she was bothered by another girl taking care of him. Rinda reassures her not to worry. In the end, Janice asks Rinda where her parents live, but since she doesn't answer that question, they subtly change the subject to go into the beach together, including Oka, as they had made pact to be together every time they went on a trip. Meanwhile, the protagonist falls asleep. When he wakes up, he finds only Coco, who apologizes for bringing everyone, and not being able to take care of him properly. She also says that she feels she's not a good girlfriend, and that it would be better if he were with someone like Rinda. The protagonist corrects her and tells her that he only wants to be with her. Coco then tells him that she wants to go to the beach in the summer, but just the two of them, not with the others, so they can be together. She said this because she had previously mentioned that he wanted his first time to be in Paris, but now she would like it to be on the beach. The protagonist agrees, and they both end up hugging each other. Now we see that our protagonist already recovered, and goes out with Coco, and they take the train. On the way, his girlfriend tells him that they call her Robo Chica in the club because of her way of dancing, and also mentions that summer vacation is coming up, and they can go to the beach. The protagonist starts thinking that he hasn't been able to tell Coco about his feelings for Rinda, nor whether she found out that they knew each other from before. When they arrive at their destination, we see that they have gathered with their club, and they show them brochures about the festival they will participate in there during the summer. During the meeting, our boy starts feeling jealous of the club leader because he is quite close to Rinda. He keeps telling himself that he shouldn't feel jealous, as he is with Coco. After the meeting, he asks his clubmates how to get to the beach as he wants to take Coco there as he promised. However, they tell him that without a car, it will be difficult, and even more so if he doesn't have money, as he needs to impress someone from a wealthy family like Coco, and for that, he needs money. Later, the protagonist is with Coco in a cafe, and she forbids him from working, as that would leave him with less time to spend with her. Despite him explaining that he needs money to go to the beach, she insists that she will cover the expenses. Oka appears, and tells them that she has to work, and when she finds out that the protagonist also wants a job, she informs him that they are looking for employees at her workplace. The cafe where Oka works, the two of them wait while observing everything, and Coco firmly says that she definitely can't work there. Night falls, and our boy goes to his room, but before that, he knocks on Nana's door to return the money she spent on the taxi to take him to the hospital, and he brings her some cookies as a token of appreciation. Nana suggests that he should thank Rinda too, but the protagonist tells her that he doesn't have money, and is looking for a job, to which Nana offers him a job as a waiter for one night, on the condition that he brings Janice along. The next day, he tells Janice about the job where they will be paid well, and just when Janice was starting to hesitate, the girls from the tea club show up, and offer them jobs that sound immoral. This prompts both of them to accept Nana's job offer, but without telling Coco. The day of the event arrives, and they meet at the protagonist's house to go together. We find out that the protagonist is lying to Coco, telling her that he's working on a report, and won't be able to use his phone for a few hours. On their way to the event, Janice praises our protagonist's patience for putting up with Coco, but the protagonist thinks that he actually only endures Coco, because he has feelings for Rinda, and he doesn't want Coco to feel too bad. Upon arriving at the venue, they are dressed in erotic costumes, our protagonists as a maid, and Janice in underwear. Later, we find out that it's a birthday party. While the guys are working, the Nana appears dressed as a devil twin, and she shows to our boy that her other twin is Rinda, who has also come to work. When the two of them see each other, they are initially embarrassed, but then start laughing at how they are dressed. Meanwhile, Coco is calling the protagonist insistently, and we see that she has the picture of the protagonist with Rinda from when they were kids. During the party, we see everyone having fun, even Janice, who flexes his muscles for money. On the other hand, Coco gets worried when she doesn't hear anything from our protagonist, so she goes to his house to look for him, but he's not there. She then goes to knock on down his door, but there's no answer there either. Back at the party, the protagonist starts seeing Rinda in a sexy way, and suddenly, she starts taking photos with other girls, and he finds himself liking the way she poses in the pictures. The crowd gathers them together to take photos of them close together, and they are given a light stick that Rinda puts in her mouth. Our boy takes advantage of this, and puts his arm around her waist, posing with her on his leg getting closer, and biting the other end of the light stick. At that moment, we see Coco getting desperate as she searches for him, and eventually arrives at the party, where she sees that the protagonist is with Rinda. He sees her, and immediately releases Rinda, both of them startled to see her. Coco approaches him, throws a drink at him, and slaps him. Rinda starts apologizing, but is taken away by Nana, while the boy takes Coco to the dressing room. He tells her that he was working and asks her to wait for him in his apartment, giving her his key. After finishing work, he rushes there, and realizes he has many messages from Coco, each one showing more concern than the previous one. Finally, when he arrives at his room, he finds Coco in the dark, and she apologizes for throwing the drink and slapping him when his wound was still open. He sits on the floor, and he apologizes to her, explaining that he wanted to be a good boyfriend, which is why he accepted a job without telling her, and he didn't know Rinda would be there. They got carried away, and nothing happened. Then she shows him the picture of him and Rinda as kids, and asks him to tell them the truth. The protagonist starts telling her everything, and says he didn't tell her because he used to love Rinda, and that he didn't want to hurt her, as sometimes those feelings come back, not his memories, but the feelings, and he feels bad about it because now Coco is his girlfriend. Coco questions him about why he didn't tell her when she's only trying to be a good girlfriend, and not think negatively, or feel insecure about him, but he says he wants to be completely honest with her. Coco gets up and hugs him, telling him never to remember the past, and to stay like this with her, because she loves him, and she doesn't know how, but she loves him. She also hints that she wants to spend the night with him, but he stops her, and she confesses that she's feeling anxious because she has no photos or memories with him yet. Until that moment, they haven't made any memories together. He accepts this, and tells her he understands but won't pressure her into anything, just because of his cowardness. He suggests to starting to take photos, and make memories together. And that's where the video ends. I will be doing more parts, so make sure to like and to subscribe to not miss them. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.